It's okay to try things out for 6 months to a year. Figure out if you like it. If you don't, move on. I would rather hire somebody who's invested for 1 year versus somebody who's not invested or gets drawn out or is burned out along the way for 10 years and not engaged. I'd rather have a new person every year engaged and into it versus somebody who's not.
All right, everyone. Welcome to the Happy Farm to Eat podcast, part 2 with pharmacist Matthew Pitlick. We're going to go a little more in depth in terms of a few other career paths that he has been involved in his past that we kind of ran out of time to go over in depth last time. Welcome again, Matthew, to the podcast.
Thanks, Chris.
Absolutely. Really happy to have you here. So I'll let you go right ahead and just take over here. If you just want to give us a quick, brief synopsis of where you were prior to this role we're going to discuss first, and then we'll go right into it.
Yeah, you bet. So last time we talked a lot about residency and where I was at during my residency as a PGY1, and then moved into my academic career as a faculty member. And then from there, my big transition into my new career paths was at MTM Consultants and Director of Clinical Services for a startup technology company for a little while. And then really, a big year where I took a chance and bet on myself a little bit and did some introspection and really invested in myself as the fellow for a pharmacy association.
Very cool, very cool. And then, how did you get into this new role that you went from after that?
Sure. And so really during that fellowship year, it's a year-long fellowship, and I knew at the time I had 1 year to really make something happen. And so I told myself for that first 6 months, I'm really going to focus. I'm going to learn as much as I can, meet as many people as I can, and really get into association management. Dive in head, up to my neck as much as I can go. And that first 6 months, that's all I'm going to do. I'm not going to look for any jobs, not going to look for anything, just learning. And really focused on that, really did that, did all my projects, kind of went above and beyond and tried meeting some people, networking, getting to know more people, even outside of pharmacy, outside the pharmacy world. Because the association world is so much bigger than just pharmacy, of course, right? There's an association for associations. And so, I got to meet a lot of different people that way. And then really, once that 6 month mark came, I started to look. And the first job I see and look for is a national association position. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is like just perfect. It was something right in my wheelhouse of doing some of the things I've been doing, and can pull in some of the skills and things I've learned from my past career. And I thought this just was like the writing on the wall. Like couldn't written a better story now, right? And I get an interview, fly out to where the association's at. Interview goes great. Everything goes fantastic. Then I get home and I get the rejection. And I was like, oh man, I thought this was really good. I thought it was perfect. And the CEO was so complimentary. She said, Matt, you did a great job. It's nothing you did. There's going to be they want people more at the where the location of the association is at. I was going to try to do some telecommuting and some virtual stuff. And even then, right, we're talking a couple years ago, that wasn't as big of a thing, right? Of course, as it is now in COVID world. So that wasn't quite an option, but they were looking for somebody with just a little bit more leadership experience and had a little bit more qualifications than some of the things that I had going on. And so I was, disappointed at that one and thought, you know what, dang, first one out the gates, how often does that happen? Not that often, right? And, just chalk that up to, first one, keep looking, keep looking, keep looking. A month goes by, 2 months goes by, not really much that I'm looking for. And I'm being selective at this point, right? I'm narrowing what I want to do in terms of the association world for something non-traditional, where I can use some of that association management background in my academic background and some of my digital health type of background to be able to help patients and help people out. And nothing's coming. And this is it comes to be about it's in March. It's at the APHA meeting where I kind of make a decision on some things of what I need to do, and there's no positions are coming up the way I thought they would be at the time. And we're talking early 2019, and I make the decision to do a couple things. One, I found out that the immediate fellow prior to me her position, she had left it to go be a CEO of a pharmacy association. And so I thought, well, that's pretty cool. The person before me just left to be a CEO of a pharmacy association.
Yeah.
Maybe I should look at what she's doing, what she did. And she was working at a place called the Iowa Healthcare Collaborative, which, very close. So that's good. I didn't have to worry about telecommuting. And they do some really cool things, getting CMS funding to do a lot of quality management, quality improvement for hospitals and clinics. And that definitely in the wheelhouse of things that I've been doing. And we did a lot of collaborating with them at the Pharmacy Association where I did my fellowship. And so I thought, it'd be good. Asked around to some of the people that they were working with, and they said, we're not going to replace her. We're just going to, kind of work with the same people that we've been working with. We don't really need a pharmacist or anybody working with us, at that point. And so, right around that APHA meeting, I made the decision, I'm just going to email their CEO, who I'd met one time at a previous local meeting, just very, very brief, like casual coffee hello. And I cold emailed him and with my CV laid out, this is what I've done. This is what I can do for you. Love the chance to meet and, get some coffee and talk, more about it. And he emails me back like a week later, says, let's chat, let's talk. And so that was a really neat experience. So I got to actually, the chat was my interview. Very, very informal interview. He sits me down. He says, tell me about yourself. What do you do? And then from there, that's like 20 minutes in, and he goes, name your number.
Wow.
Yep. And it's a physician, right? So that maybe tell you a little difference between a physician and pharmacist mindset and other healthcare professional mindset in how things are done. But yeah, from that point on, this was April-ish time of my fellowship year, which would be ending in June, that I landed that position, which was something I'd cold email some people before, but usually just a chat, never to like for job interviews or things like that. So that was
Yeah, and
uncomfortable.
I'm just curious there, did you word it differently than like a regular, I guess you'd say cold email for just networking purposes, or was it kind of a
Yep.
combination?
It was very different than just for networking purposes. It wasn't, hey, you'd love to grab coffee sometime if you have a chance. It was very deliberate. I put things in there, my qualifications, the things that I can do for that company, what value I can bring to that company as a pharmacist. At the time, this company was mostly nurses and quality improvement officers and quality folks. They didn't have a pharmacist on the team at the time. Their CEO is the only physician. And so I just thought, why not put in some of my qualifications that I could bring and bring that value to that company. They didn't know necessarily that I needed a job, right? But I laid it out for them, the value that I could bring as a pharmacist and somebody that's had an academic background and had a diverse background, and gotten to meet a lot of people over the course of my time in my career.
Wow. So essentially, you kind of created a position in a way by doing that email.
I recreated it, I'd say.
Okay.
Because remember that the previous fellow was in that position and she did a wonderful job, and she created the position, if I'll give full credit there. But when I reached back out, they said, no, we don't need one. So I kind of re-stepped in and recreated it. It's more like, kind of when you wash your hair, you still got that lather going. I just kind of recreated the lather a little bit.
Gotcha. And then, so you finished the fellowship and then you were able to go into that position. Tell me a little bit
Yeah.
more, what that entailed and what you did in that role.
Yeah, right into that position. If you remember, my interview lasted approximately 20 minutes, in which I really didn't know it was an interview. That was an interesting part. So I didn't know exactly fully what I was getting into. I knew that I'd be helping out hospitals and clinics in a big way with their quality improvement. So, their HEDIS measures, their NCQA measures, ACO measures, and I would bring the pharmacist perspective to a lot of these different areas and how to improve. And so I knew education was going to be a big part of it. And if you remember from the first podcast, education is extremely important to me. That's the one common thread throughout all my career endeavors is education. And that's one thing I knew I could bring and do a good job at. I think that's one of the reasons why I got that position, is because I knew that's something I could do and do it well. And the other thing was kind of, trying to provide influence. We often think of, into the nurses and physician world to get them to influence, but we need also influence pharmacists to be able to do some of these things as well. And the fellowship at the Pharmacy Association really brought that piece into it, because that's the whole essence of what we're trying to do, right? Is influence folks to do great and better things across the board. And so those two pieces were big. I didn't realize the struggle it would be on my end to get the folks at the company to learn what a pharmacist could do, to change minds. That was the biggest one. Yeah, so that was the biggest hurdle to get over. And we were doing that, towards the end of my time at the collaborative. We were doing some great things. We were working on some comprehensive medication management programs and getting pharmacists in some clinics in some rural hospitals and clinics and critical access hospitals, which was really cool, and where they need a lot of those services from pharmacists to meet core measures and to meet quality improvement standards. And yeah, so that was what I was doing there, really helping develop the process to meet those quality improvement standards. And we were doing awesome things, doing fantastic things. And unfortunately, like, CMS funded groups, and when things are highly volatile at the federal government level, that funding ran dry. And at the time, we were a 50 employee company. And so I started there July 2019. And by February 2020, that position was eliminated from that group along with about 25 others. And so I'm square one again, right? Unfortunately, I'm back to 2017, where I remember I created my vision board, my dream board, and I feel like I'm back at that point, which was that hurt a lot, right? I thought I'd put in a good chunk of time and effort and planning and soul searching to figure out what I wanted to do, and now I'm back at square one.
Now, quickly before I'll catch you right there, quick. So was that the role you visioned, that you were something you would be doing, long term, or did you kind of think that was just a stepping stone into your future? Or what were your thoughts on that role?
Yeah, no, I didn't think it was going to be long term. Did not think it was going to be long term. But I don't know if I necessarily viewed it as a stepping stone at the time. I thought it would be a great place to learn, do a slightly different uh, take on some of that association management work, on some of the even the academic work I've been doing, really working in a non-patient care role but affect patient care in a very big way. I just thought it was a very neat opportunity. And I think, from these last few years of my career, these opportunities I've gotten, I've looked at them as opportunities and not necessarily as a stepping stone to get to somewhere else necessarily.
Gotcha. No, that makes sense. And then of course, you said February 2020. So as everyone listening, knows that that's kind of like when, where we are right now still, with COVID kind of began, right? And then this whole working from home or what have you, but just pretty much everything shifting like crazy. So walk me through what was in your mind and what was going on when this happened, and then COVID at the same time, and everything in between.
Absolutely. And I'm thinking this is early February that I get this news that positions eliminated. And I've been following it COVID since January. And I'm terrified. Luckily, my only saving grace was I live in Iowa. And so it's got the virus has to travel inward to me at some point. So I got some time. I'm good at least on that. I live in the middle of the country. The one great thing about it, right, where hopefully a virus can't get to you from the coast in that amount of time. But like everybody, I'm terrified. I'm terrified to go out. I don't want to do anything to disrupt my family, put them at risk. And so really, I let my career search, job search, it came to a halt pretty quickly. Because by that time, they were nice enough to give me a little bit of a severance to last till the end of the month. And so I knew I didn't have to do anything. March rolls around, find out the kids, my children, are going to be staying at home. Somebody's got to teach them, and so make the decision that I'll be staying home and teaching the kids. It was a pretty easy decision. Right. But and I looked forward to that. I got to spend some more time with my kids, otherwise than I normally would have, which was a nice experience. I thought it wouldn't last, for March, April, 3-4 months. At the time, I thought maybe a month, and then I'd get back into the searching for things, that sort of stuff. And so that doesn't happen. So now I'm thinking, okay, there's some steps I need to take now to make sure my family is secure financially. So I enroll in unemployment. And so get that going, and then try to, make sure our finances are in check. We're lucky enough that we were smart enough, over the course of 10 years to save, put money away, have a safety net, that sort of stuff. So that's all due to my wife. She's the saving grace for that. So I'll chalk that all up to her. But luckily we do that. But with unemployment, right, you have to apply for jobs every so often in order to keep that unemployment. And so I'm doing that. I'm being selective and trying to get a process down in order to do that. And so I apply for some positions where maybe there'd be some remote work that we could do. Of course, even after COVID we thought was going to be over at the time, or whenever it would return to normal. And so I'm applying to, some positions where I think I do some similar quality work. I applied to health plans, applied to some national associations for some part-time work and some
And
full-time work with some things.
I just want to pause you there really quick, Matt.
Oh
So
yeah.
really quick, for people who might be in the same exact scenario, right? Or at least this happened to them at some time frame from COVID, right? And currently going on. How different is this job search feel for you compared to pre-COVID? I'm just
Yeah.
curious. I just want to hear your take on that.
No, it's totally different. It's 100% different. And it's mostly, and I had done a couple things on this particular job search, which was completely wrong. Looking back on it, and the first thing is I let go, and I didn't go back to my vision board and dream board early enough. And I went back to, all right, let's get back on LinkedIn and look at anything and everything and see what I can get. Which was, is at the time you didn't know, and I just let everything go of what the good habits that I'd learned over that first job search process to this process. I totally let it go, which was a mistake. Hindsight 2020. But yeah, it's totally different. And I was, looking for things that I didn't even, I'm looking for jobs at, at companies that I had not written off, but knew that I wouldn't be a good fit for. But now I'm applying for jobs just because I think I need something.
And then so now you're getting to that process of you're still filtering though, you're applying to jobs, and then what was going on after that?
Yeah, so I'm still filtering, still going through stuff, and I'm applying, and I'm back up to about 30, 35 applications in, maybe 5, 6 interviews, nothing really happening. It goes back to, these are jobs I'm not incredibly excited about, so my interviews aren't incredibly, enlightening or engaging at all, and I'm not just not doing what I want to be doing, what I'd planned on, what I'd thought, I put in all this effort and all this work for, and I'm really starting to get resentful and mad and depressed, even. So this whole last year of 2020 was a struggle for my mental health. It definitely was, from a variety of different reasons and standpoints, but it was a struggle. It really was. Rejections coming left and right from different positions that I'm applying for. Kids aren't going back to work, so I'm getting resentful, that it's, blaming the kids now, or blaming my wife that, I got to be the one to stay home and watch the kids now. And, from the first podcast, I have a pretty strong professional identity, and I want to do well in my profession. I want to give back to my profession. And it's just something very important to me, and I just wasn't able to do that. And I got frustrated, mad, resentful, depressed.
Yeah, and I absolutely think you're not alone, right, in that situation. I feel like this year is just such a different year compared to anything any of us have experienced, right? And then on top of it, you have your kids at home and trying to do the job search. So I can't imagine. I'm sure some other people listening could also relate to this, and I feel like it's very helpful to hear just how your process through it. Of course, it sounds like things turned around. So what exactly happened as you kept having these interviews and applying and everything like that?
Yeah. And so really, I kind of went back, when I realized it's too late, but what was I doing when the things were working? What was I doing then? And I, kind of went back. It's almost looking back at your journal and thinking about what happened during, this period in my life. And I went back and read it and looked at it and remember, oh, I had this vision board. Let's go back and look at it and see what happened. Okay, are the things still relevant on it? Is this really what I want? Yep, still really what I want to be doing. Okay, now what position should we be looking for to be able to do this? And started being a little more selective with it, and tailoring my application again, instead of just this generic blank application and cover letter, but really, doing formalizing and changing up the things that I'd been doing in my application and in my cover letters and such. And went back to what are the things that I want to do, and it's back to education. It's back to being there to help career development and professional development for people. It's back to being an innovator and developing new services and doing those different things. And so I started applying for those types of positions again instead of anything that's coming my way. When I was applying for all these jobs, for the most part, the ones that were open are pharma companies, MSLs, health plans, PBMs, ones that they're offering all this work on LinkedIn, but 150 applications for one position, so they can be selective in what they're doing and look for some gems versus my generic stuff that was out there. And so I go back to start applying to association positions again, some of the other quality roles, and even back to some hospital pharmacy and clinical manager positions. And so I applied to a clinical manager position at a local hospital, local health system, and thought it's a good fit for what my skill set is and background. And I get a call from that hiring manager or the person who supervised that role, that pharmacist. And she calls me and says, "Hey, I got another position open too. I want you to apply for both." This particular person I had met during my fellowship. And so I'd gotten to know her a little bit during my fellowship at the Pharmacy Association. And I think that's the reason she felt comfortable being able to call me. And she knew my background a little bit, saying, "Hey, you apply for both, give you a better shot." Knew the position I was in at the time of my struggles finding a position, and I applied for both. And so the one I applied for was a clinical pharmacy manager position, up my alley of things that I can do. My background in clinical pharmacy and education and some of the things that they were trying to do clinically and build services. And the other job she wanted me to apply for was a hospital pharmacy manager position. And I had thought, hospital pharmacy manager, like drug distribution and making IVs, sterile compounding, that sort of stuff. I hadn't done that since residency, and I barely did that when I was a resident. I did it, maybe a few weekends during my residency of inpatient hospital pharmacy. We did outpatient pharmacy and then just clinical stuff as residents. We didn't really do much inpatient hospital pharmacy. I thought, holy smokes, this sounds like a bad idea to apply for that one. But I did anyway, because why not? Why not take a shot? And luckily enough, I applied for it. I interviewed for both same day. We just did 2 interviews, same positions, because it's the same company, same health system. We just knocked them out. And it was I went back and, kind of reflected on things as post interview. And I thought, I could do this, either position. I'd probably feel more comfortable in the clinical pharmacy manager role, just because that's more up my alley. The hospital pharmacy stuff, that'd be a big learning curve of things to do. I imagine they wouldn't want somebody, in that role, like having a major learning curve like I would have, to be able to manage and lead a group of hospital pharmacists and technicians. And so I kind of wrote it off as probably not going to happen. And then I get the call from the supervisor. She's like, you're our top choice for the hospital pharmacy manager position. And I was like, oh, okay, that's really neat. And then she's like, do you want, she wanted to let me know, and then went back to HR from there. And so we negotiated that role, and I became the hospital pharmacy manager at that health system, which was really neat. And that was in October. That call came in September, and I started in October of 2020.
Gotcha. So you actually got the role you weren't expecting to get, but
got the role. There's one career track where I never thought I would be when I started my career, and that would be a hospital pharmacist.
Yeah. And I mean, how was the learning curve for you since you?
How is the learning curve?
Well,
it's still
true.
going.
It's true. Still going, of course.
It's still going. And over the course of those 8 months, I lost a lot of self-confidence. The confidence I had in myself just plummeted. And for a variety of reasons, it's a lot of different things went into that. And so really, when I looked, I told myself, at post-interview, I was like, I don't think I would hire myself for this position if I was their hiring manager. But obviously that person who hired me saw something in me that told them that I could do the job, which was hugely encouraging. And that was one of the things that helped me get out of my funk. Still getting out of my funk. But that was huge to have somebody. I mean, they didn't even like they did reach out, but it was kind of a different kind of outreach just with a position and a position offer to interview. But just that sort of stuff just built that self confidence back up. To, maybe I can do some of this stuff. And then you get into the position, and the position description. It's got everything under the sun on what a hospital pharmacy manager should do. And then you kind of get into it, and you figure out what they need, what they don't need, and what these people needed and what they wanted was really just a manager to help guide them and be an advocate for them as a department whole to the administration. They didn't need me to be a hospital pharmacist. I have to have knowledge of hospital pharmacy, right? I have to know how medication goes from our pharmacy into the Pyxis machine on the floor and all the steps in between. But I'm not the one doing that. I have to be an advocate to be able to get other people to do their jobs better in the way they want to and help fulfill them. And so it's checking off all these things I really didn't expect, right away to be, part of my career. I'm leading a group of people. I'm helping, create a vision for a department and lead towards that vision. I'm coaching, I'm career developing. We're getting into some professional development, a ton of education going on, not only to our pharmacist staff, but also to nurses and physicians, and really doing some innovative things too. We're developing new services, and I just had no idea, right? Going into prior to even interviewing, right? If I did not know what I know now, wouldn't have interviewed, and things wouldn't have worked out the way it happened. And just amazing things that
Well, I love how
are
you
going on.
explain. I love how you explain that, just because it does put a completely different spin on the thought of what that position actually entailed, right? Everyone looking at that, even like yourself, like you saw that title and you're like, I don't really know, right? And then now you're in it and you're seeing how much more there is to it, and it's a lot different than what you thought, right? And it actually does
Absolutely.
fit what you were looking for in a way, which is awesome. And you're getting to learn, so many different things, and help so many other um, professionals, and not only pharmacists, which is awesome. So you are getting that perspective of teaching and giving back to others, and everything in between. So that's awesome. And in terms of, um, do you feel like when you were searching for the job, a big part of, maybe, not to say that it didn't, I mean, you did it pretty quickly still, especially during COVID, but do you think the whole self-doubt, or just being your own worst critic, had a big part of, kind of holding you back, and kind of realizing what positions fit you best during this time?
Absolutely. Just that self-doubt, negative self-critic, inner talk, telling you can't do something, or you're not good enough for this. That was huge. That was huge, and I'm still kind of getting over that at this point. And then the other thing too, and it's just kind of reflected on this as we're talking, but I was looking for things for me that it was very selfish. And once I got into this role as that hospital pharmacy manager, it's about everybody else, and I'm trying to be that servant leader to try to lead and manage, and it's not for me. It's not just about me, which is something I think when that shift happened, that changed the game. That's where things started turning in terms of interviewing and doing well in that aspect.
Yeah, and I love the idea of, you said, going back to your vision board, which my wife is huge on vision boards. I think she does one every year. She's a therapist, but that's kind of her thing. And but I for those listening, I'm just curious if you could quickly just walk through, like, your process, like the mindset of when you create a vision board, what were the steps that you took, and how did that change things for you in the long run?
Yes. So in my vision board, it's I created buckets, and this is what I think of as buckets. So large, broad categories of things that are important to me and that I would like in my work, essentially. And so those big things, like I said, the first one always was education. And so I would bullet out after education, um, more detailed pieces of things that I'd like to do. And then another big broad category, advocacy. That's a big topic. Bullet out what exactly advocacy means in my in my world. And this stuff changes. The big topics don't change necessarily, but your bullets do, and what you'd want to do with them. And so, back when I first created my vision board, it was, in terms of advocacy, it was really legislative advocacy, kind of more political. And now my advocacy is really to my hospital administration and being advocates for my team, and then also advocates for my patients that we're serving as well. And so that's kind of what advocacy means to me. And that's how you change up, your bullet points and your details, but my buckets really don't change.
Gotcha. No, that's super helpful just to hear your thought process on it too. And as we wrap things up here, I know, and I appreciate, I love how we were able to do this with 2 parts and kind of go really in depth with everything. And I really appreciate that you were able to walk everyone through that, including myself, on your journey. And just want to hear, for those who are still in that boat that you described, right? Because obviously we're all well aware COVID is still going on. It's still crazy right now. Any other words of wisdom or thoughts for on top of the vision board, just other things that people should be focusing on, or a couple pieces of advice for those that are kind of in the position that you exactly described?
Yeah, absolutely. No, networking, of course, we always say networking is great. Do what you can, if it's LinkedIn, that's great. And it's being active on LinkedIn, not passive like other social media websites and platforms. But network as much as you can. In particular, I'd say with your pharmacy associations, because they're really the connectors of folks, and they know a lot of different people you may not know. That's how I got, a lot of my roles was through that network and through pharmacy association connections, which was hugely important. And that's, don't be afraid to try things. Don't be afraid to try stuff out for 6 months to a year. I think if you look back at if I put my CV and resume in front of somebody, I think this is why, I got a lot of rejections. They look at it and they see, since 2017, I've had 3-4 different positions. And so I'm getting a new job every year. And that, to a hiring manager, and I'm in this role now, that's a red flag, right? That's a person that's going to hop around, not stay committed to a team. I'm hoping to change this, and this is one of the things I want to do, more globally as management and leadership. But I think I want to tell people it's okay to try things out for 6 months to a year. Figure out if you like it. If you don't, move on. I would rather hire somebody who's invested for 1 year versus somebody who's not invested or gets drawn out or is burned out along the way for 10 years and not engaged. I'd rather have a new person every year engaged and into it versus somebody who's not. And so that's one of the things that I'm gonna, go on my mountain, go on my soapbox and do for folks. Because I think in this time this is gonna be one way to figure out, one, if you like something, two, if you're good at it, and that's how we're going to get new employees and kind of beat some of this burnout and job dissatisfaction.
No, I love that idea. That's awesome advice. And I wanted to thank you again for being on the podcast. And if anyone wanted to reach out to you, what would be the best way to reach out with any questions,
Yeah,
thoughts?
absolutely. Please reach out anytime, anything. You can email me, matthew.pitlick@gmail.com, or hit me up on LinkedIn as well, Matthew Pitlick on LinkedIn.
Awesome, Matt. Well, thank you again so much. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Chris.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining us today on this part 2 episode with pharmacist Matthew Pitlick. I really hope you got a lot of useful information, especially from hearing from Matt's own personal experience in transitioning into different pharmacy roles over the years, and just kind of hearing what each one of these roles entails and how one would make that transition. I feel like it's super helpful also to hear about his vision board practicing in terms of to help really determine what types of roles fit you best, and really what are your goals for your future as a pharmacist. What kind of field are you looking to get into, and what really meets your needs and aspirations and goals down the road. So please feel free to get back to us with any questions or concerns. We're more than happy to discuss anything with you. And thank you guys again for joining us today on the podcast.